Sentire Media.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of A New Life in Italy. I'm your host, Samantha Wilson, and today's episode is one of those that might completely shift how you see Italy. Because on the surface, Italy can feel confusing, slow, fragmented, sometimes even a little disorganized. And if you've ever tried to apply for a visa or buy a home or deal with a comune or honestly just get a straight answer from anyone, you've probably thought to yourself, what is going on here? But what if I told you that this isn't random, it isn't chaos, and Italy isn't bad at systems? Italy is actually behaving exactly the way it's wired to behave. And that wiring comes from something much deeper. So today I want to walk you through a concept that I came across recently that explains so much. Why a big country like Italy often acts like a small one. And once you understand this, everything starts to make a lot more sense. And not just intellectually, but practically. Because instead of feeling frustrated or stuck, or like you're doing something wrong, you start to see the patterns. You start to understand why things move the way they do, why answers change depending on who you ask, and why timing feels very unpredictable, but most importantly, how to actually work with the system instead of constantly pushing against it. Because when you get this, Italy doesn't feel like a barrier anymore. It starts to feel like something you can navigate, and even something you can use to your advantage. Are you ready? Let's get into it. I'm Samantha Wilson, and this is A New Life in Italy, a show for people who love Italy and are quietly trying to figure out what it would really take to build a life here. We talk honestly about the practical choices, the emotional shifts, and the parts of this journey that don't always get talked about, so that you can move forward feeling informed, grounded, and more confident. If you're somewhere between dreaming and doing, you are in exactly the right place. Now, let's get into today's show. All right, let's start with something that might surprise you. Italy is not a small country. Yes, it's small in size, I understand that, but it's not small economically, not culturally, and definitely not strategically. Italy is the third largest economy in the European Union, and it's one of the most visited countries in the world. It is a global powerhouse in fashion and design and food and manufacturing. It is not a little country trying its best. It is a major player. And yet, Italy often behaves like it isn't. It hesitates, it negotiates. It avoids strong, decisive moves, and instead of leading, it often adapts, it balances, it waits. Now, if you're living here or planning to move here, you've probably felt this already. You feel it when you process something or when you try to do something and it takes longer than expected, where decisions get passed around and no one wants to give you a definitive answer. It can feel like no one is really in charge, but there is a reason for all that. And here's where it gets really interesting, because what you're experiencing on the ground today is not just bureaucracy, it's history, it's culture, it's thousands of years of learning how to survive, adapt, and coexist in a country that was never really designed to function as one single unified system. Italy as a unified nation is actually very young, and this is really important to remember. For most of Italy's history, it wasn't Italy at all. It was a collection of independent states, city-states, kingdoms, regions with their own rules and their own identities, their own ways of doing things. Florence, certainly not Naples, and Venice was not Rome, and Sicily was not Milan. And they didn't just have different accents or food. They had different governments, different laws, different priorities. They competed with each other. They still kind of do. And they protected their own interests. They built systems that worked locally, not nationally. So what happened when Italy finally unified? Well, those systems didn't just disappear. They layered, they blended, they compromised, and they compressed. And what you have today is not one clean, centralized machine. It's actually a network a country that still operates in many ways like a collection of small worlds trying to function together, which means power is rarely absolute and decisions are rarely final, and control is often shared or negotiated or quietly redirected, depending, of course, on where you are and who you're dealing with. So when you feel like one office tells you one thing and another office tells you something completely different, well, you're not crazy. You're stepping into a system that was never built to be perfectly consistent. It was built to be flexible. And that flexibility is both the frustration and the magic of living in Italy. In Italy, it's often referred to as the Calimero complex. Now, Calimero is this little cartoon chick who walks around believing that the world is against him. He's small, he's overlooked, and he feels like he doesn't have any power. And that mindset has quietly shaped how Italy sees itself. Even though it's a major country, there's this underlining tendency to feel kind of underestimated, act cautiously, assume it has less influence than it actually does. And when you carry that mindset, you don't lead boldly. You protect yourself. You compromise. You keep everyone somewhat happy instead of making very strong moves. Now let's connect that to your experience, because suddenly Italy starts to feel very different. Because once you see it through that lens, it kind of clicks. All of those moments that felt random or frustrating start to feel almost predictable. You're not dealing with a system that's trying to dominate or control. You're dealing with a system that is trying not to overstep. That's a completely different energy. So what does it actually look like in real life? Well, it looks like hesitation instead of certainty. It looks like multiple opinions instead of one clear direction. It looks like people being super careful with their answers, because giving a definitive yes or no carries a lot of responsibility. And responsibility in this mindset is something that people don't rush into. So instead, you'll hear things like, let's see, or maybe, or it depends. And if you're coming from a culture where clarity equals competence, well, this can feel like confusion to you. But it's not confusion, it's caution. It's a way of keeping options open, of not locking into something too quickly, of making sure that no one is exposed or blamed or put in a difficult position later. And this shows up really everywhere. In your visa process, you might ask a direct question and get a very indirect answer, not because they don't know, but because they don't want to give you something that could later be challenged or changed or even contradicted by another office or another officer literally the next day. Now, in real estate, you'll see negotiations stretch and shift and evolve, because the goal isn't just to win the deal, it's to keep the relationship intact, to make sure that everyone walks away feeling okay. In the comune, decisions often move very slowly, not because nothing is happening, but because there are these layers of quiet checks, of conversations, and informal approvals that are happening behind the scenes. It's a system that moves through consensus more than command. That's the best way of explaining it. And here's the shift that I also want you to make. Instead of asking, why won't someone just decide? Why won't they just tell me yes or no? Start asking, who needs to feel comfortable for this to move forward? Because that's how things actually get done here. It's not about pushing harder. It's about understanding where the hesitation is coming from and working with it. Building trust, asking the same question, but just in a little different way. If you give people space to guide you without forcing them into the corner, you'll get more help. Because the moment someone feels pressure to take a hard stance, that's when things slow down even more or quietly stop. And that American stomp your feet to get your way, I promise you, will backfire every single time. So when you start to understand this mindset, Italy stops feeling like it's resisting you. And you start to see it's actually just protecting itself. And once you understand how that protection works, you can move through it in a completely different way with more ease, maybe a little more patience, and honestly, a lot more success. The way that we look at it here at Smart Move Italy is that Italy runs on these layers. national rules. Yes, we have laws and rules and national rules, but then there's this regional interpretation. And then even more so, there's a local execution. And that last layer, that local execution, that's where everything changes, because that's where people come in. And people bring judgment, experience, and personality, even mood sometimes. I'm often asked, where's the best comune to do XYZ? Or where's the best place to apply for my citizenship? This changes with the people. And two comune can be following the exact same law, but still give you two completely different paths to get there. Not because there's one right and one wrong, but because each one is applying the rules in a way that makes sense to them locally. And this is the part that most people don't understand when they first arrive. They think, I just need to find the rule. I just need a checklist. But in Italy, the rule is only part of the equation. The real question is, how is this rule interpreted here, in the place where you're at? Because interpretation is everything. And this is why you'll hear stories like, well, my friend did it this way, or I read it online that it works like this, or the consulate told me something completely different. And all of those things may be true all at the same time. And instead of seeing that as chaos, I want you to start seeing it as range. This is kind of a nicer way of looking at it. There's often more than one way to get to the same outcome, but not every path works in every place. So what does this really mean for you practically? It means that success in Italy is not just about having the right documents. It's about understanding the environment that you're in. It's about knowing when to ask again, when to clarify, and when to approach something completely differently. And of course, when to lean into relationships, because relationships here are not optional. I'm going to say that again because it's very, very important. Italy is based on relationships, and they're not optional here. They are part of the system. The person who takes the time to explain to you, the agent who knows a specific comune and knows how they work, the consultant who may have navigated that exact process that you need to do 10 times before. These are not nice to haves. They are how things get done and how things move here. And this is also why trying to force Italy into this rigid checklist-style process can backfire. We feel that pressure from new arrivals every single day. People who just want a checklist. And when we say, well, it depends, we get this resistance. It feels uncomfortable for people. Because the moment you expect everything to follow in a straight line, you are going to feel resistance. I promise you this. So instead, think of it more like a conversation, a process that unfolds, something that requires a little bit of navigation, a bit of patience, and of course, a lot of strategy. And here's a part I really want you to take away. Complicated doesn't mean impossible. Different doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means you need a different approach. And once you start approaching Italy in its own terms and on its own terms, you'll notice something shift. Things start to open up. People become much more helpful. Answers become a lot clearer. And what once felt like a wall starts to feel like a door. And you actually know how to open it. Now, you might be wondering why. Why is Italy like this? Well, as I said at the beginning, the answer is history, and a lot of it. And that history doesn't just disappear overnight with a new app or a new process. And you have to layer in the political instability over the decades here, frequent government changes, and need to constantly adapt rather than dominate. And what you get is a country that has learned to negotiate instead of dictate, adapt instead of control, and balance instead of push. It's actually a survival strategy, and in many ways it works. So how do you, as a foreigner, survive it? Well, you start to ask better questions, build better relationships, take the time to build better relationships, and stay flexible in your approach. And this is why some people come to Italy and feel completely overwhelmed because they don't do that. And others can navigate it beautifully because it's not luck, my friends. It's all mindset. So if you've ever felt like Italy doesn't make sense, I hope this episode gave you a little different lens. Italy isn't trying to be something it's not. It's not trying to be difficult. It's also not trying to be fast or rigid or overly structured. It's operating exactly as a country shaped by history and regions and relationships should. And once you understand that, everything will change for you. Now, if this episode resonated with you and you're thinking about making the move, this is exactly the kind of insight that makes a difference between a stressful experience and a really beautiful one. And as always, if you need help navigating your move, whether that's a visa or property or just understanding how to do this the right way, you know where to find us. I'll see you on the next episode. It's time for listener questions. Just like the old radio call-in shows, my team has picked 3 listener questions, all left on our voicemail. I have no idea what these questions are, but I haven't been stumped yet. Are you ready? Let's get started. All right, my friends, time for questions. Question number 1. Why does my visa process seem completely different from someone else's, even when we're applying for the same thing? Well, this is actually perfect for this episode because it's an example that almost everyone feels. And the only reason, first of all, you know it's different is because you're probably, knee deep in or deeper in social media and reading what other people are saying and taking a lot of it as a rule or as fact. The bottom line is there are a lot of armchair quarterbacks on social media, and a lot of them have very good intentions. They want to help or share their experience. But what's really important to remember is that every single person's experience, right from the visa process all the way to coming and moving and settling into Italy, is going to be different. Parts of it will resemble the same because there are some things in law that must be done, like getting a permesso di soggiorno, things like that. But the process from A to Z is going to vary depending on who you are, where you're from, what consulate you are applying to, what your situation is, where you're moving to, the comune, the amount of people, the house that you're living in, who you're moving here with, how much money that you have, how healthy you are. All of those things factor in. So you are a unique person, and your visa equally is just as unique. So my suggestion to you is it will be completely different. Sometimes really different, sometimes just a little bit different than other people's. And that's okay. Again, different doesn't mean it's wrong. Just try to stay in your lane and try to just focus on yourself and try to push away all of the noise that's out there that's going to make you feel like you're doing something wrong. Follow the step-by-step process that you need to go through and trust yourself in that process. Question number 2, how do I know which information to trust when I'm getting different answers from the consulate and the comune and even online? So this is, again, a perfect question considering this episode. As I said in the initial question, everybody's situation is very, very different. But what happens when it's the consulate who you would think you should be able to trust for their information versus the comune or even the questura here in Italy? So things are very different. What happens to you even at the consulate at their level, you would think that they should know what the questura or the comune is going to do in Italy, but they don't. And for the same reasons that I explained in this podcast, they can't possibly know on a local level what a comune is going to respond to. We have the law, we have the national laws, and the consulates should always follow them, and usually they do, but they're very discretionary, the way that they approach them, but typically they follow the same path. But how that's actually executed in person here in Italy are 2 different things often. And we get this conflict a lot. We get people who say, well, the consulate told me this. And we say, yeah, but that's not going to work in Italy. Yes, but the consulate, yeah, but it's not going to work in Italy. I promise you, you get here, you will be denied. No, but the consulate, and then lo and behold, they arrive, do what the consulate says, and they get rejected. And then we have to step in yet again. So what I need you to do, instead of worrying, I know what's probably in your mind right now is thinking, well, how am I ever going to know? You need to do each process under the umbrella of each singular agency. So whatever the consulate tells you to do for the visa, you do for the visa. What the comune tells you to do for residency, you do for the comune. What the questura tells you to do for your permesso di soggiorno, you do. So ask the right questions to the right office and follow those guidelines. Don't say, well, somebody else told me something different, because all you have to know is what they want from you. And question number 3. Is there a way to speed things up in Italy? I like this question. Is there a way to speed things up in Italy, or is it really just about waiting and being patient? Yeah, it's about waiting and being patient. Now, I'm going to actually just add a little something to that, because this is a country built on relationships, and often doors are opened and things move a lot faster if you know the right people. And this is very, very true in Italy, but actually it's even true in consulates. It's true in anything really attached to Italy, actually probably true even in other countries. But in Italy, typically most foreigners know some people, but not enough people to open doors that wide for you to speed things up. So my advice to you is just be patient. Just take your time, and if your permit is taking more than 3 months, more than 6 months, you can check and see if it's ready. Make a phone call or 2, because their notification system here isn't always great. But if it's not ready, it's not ready. That's what it is. It's a long game. It's a long process. Moving to Italy is not fast in any sense. Even when you're here, settling in is not fast. It will take you longer. So waiting and being patient is the best recipe for success. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you of something. You don't need all of the answers right now. You just need the right questions and the space to think clearly. If this episode helped you feel more grounded or less alone, that's exactly why the show exists. You can find all of the links and the resources that I mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. And if you want to go deeper, head over to smartmoveitaly.com for more ways that we can help you make your move to Italy a whole lot easier. And if you're enjoying the show, subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with someone that is also dreaming about Italy helps more than you know. Thanks again for spending time with me. I will see you next week. Ciao for now.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.